So what do we have here?
So yeah, this is a circa 1600 Italian rapier, probably Milanese in origin based on the maker's mark. It is a pretty interesting piece, and one of the reasons that I wanted to have it is a lot of rapiers we see in manuals are quite long, and yet a lot of rapiers made now for modern practice are shorter than a lot of those masters advocated. Capo Ferro advocated this idea that the pommel should go to your armpit while you're standing.
Yeah, which is like a long sword, and a fairly long one too.
Fairly long, yeah. It matches like Vadi's measurement, an Italian fencing master. And then some talk about the quillin going to the belly button. So this is actually long. I'm a very tall guy. I'm 6'5", and this actually, my belly button's here, so it's actually taller. This is the Capo Ferro measurement for you.
That's pretty close. It's very long.
Yeah, so it is very long. And one thing that's notable about it is it's also much thicker at the base in the stock here. So we can see this is nearly half an inch thick. And so a lot of modern blades are done with quarter-inch thick stock. And part of that is just because that's what's available. And so it's a lot cheaper. To get this custom made, you're gonna have to pay a lot more. It tapers really quite quickly. You can handle this one. You can feel that though it is very long, it actually feels really, really well balanced.
Yeah.
And so much of that is because of this very thick stock at the base, and that strong distal taper down the length of the weapon allows it to move really beautifully. And whereas a lot of very long rapiers done with that thinner stock just don't handle very nicely. And so a lot of people really don't like them as rapiers. And so that's why those shorter blades. But I feel that you can use this one as nimbly as we use a lot of our shorter ones. And this is 48 inches from the crossbar to the point. Whereas, most people are using 42-inch blades in modern practice. Not that there aren't museum pieces like that, but this is very representative of what we see in manuals. Feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely feels a lot more nimble than you might expect. This illustrates why high-quality reproductions come at a certain price point.
Yes.
Because, yes, it is a lot easier to take thinner stock and then not have that kind of distal taper. Also, if you start out with really thick stock and then you want to achieve this kind of distal taper,
take a lot of
if you
material.
do it by stock removal, you're wasting a whole lot of steel, right?
Yes.
Whereas if you forge it, that's also going to be more expensive, of course, because there's more labor.
Yes.
So more hours. It makes sense that a lot of reproductions are not going to be that accurate in a certain price range.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing that when I was able to find this particular antique too, it has a bunch of different marks of wear. So this was a rapier that was used, whereas a lot of museum piece rapiers we find are actually rapiers that were probably more your display sword, your court sword, and so not necessarily ones that saw much action. And so this is somebody's dueling weapon. And so I thought that was, when we had the chance to buy it, I thought, okay, this is pretty great. One thing I also love, it's got a lot of presence. It has a lot, because of, again, this distal taper. One thing with a rapier in the real dueling rapier era, 1600s era, in Italian rapier in particular, there's a lot that has to do with setting aside or pushing away the opponent's weapon. Your weapon has to have some presence. And this weapon, because it has such strength in this section of the blade, it has a lot of presence. So it's able to be used to push away an opponent's weapon more effectively. I've actually handled a lot of modern rapiers too. When you hold them, they kind of bend under their own weight because of the steel. Whereas you can see this one really
This one has a set, so don't mistake that.
Yeah, right. But it is not just bending under its own weight, because there's some stoutness to that steel. That's a weapon you can push through somebody.
It does flex quite a bit.
Yeah, so it's not, that's one thing, we need to have some flex just to, for the steel itself to be resilient.
Yeah, otherwise you might just break it.
It'll just break it, yeah.
Unless you make it really thick.
Right.
Thick throughout as well, and then it becomes rather clunky. So.
Yeah, when I was in Lübeck at the St. Anna Museum, they had a very interesting rapier there that was a diamond, not like meaning it was a lenticular blade that is diamond. It was literally a diamond rapier. So it was essentially like a square stock turned on its side that tapered to a very strong point, and it was incredibly stiff, but also really well balanced. So representing like another side of rapier, almost an S-stock of sorts, that was clearly maybe thinking about there being some armor on the other side of it, or wanting to have even greater presence. And I thought it was a really interesting piece. But I've also handled quite a few rapiers, also in a few different German museums, also in Sweden, that were more flexible, and they were also clearly rapiers that were used. So obviously, just as is now, then people had different preferences for what they wanted in their weapons.
And there is some overlap between S-stocks and rapiers because like the most iconic form that you typically see is the two-handed S-stock.
Right.
But there are S-stocks that look much more like a rapier. Where in the gray area do you want to artificially draw a line?
These terms were more later applied terms to classify
They weren't
weapons.
rigid with typology by any means. This is enormous reach.
Yeah.
Like the camera is pretty far away, but it feels like with a lunge, I can almost
you could
reach
almost take it out.
In terms of length, this is very comparable to a longsword, but you have actually a lot more reach with this compared to a longsword because you're in a bladed stance, you're extending the one arm as opposed to shortening it by gripping with the other arm where the shoulder is further back. So this, in terms of reach, this is a lot.
Yeah.
Here you also see, again, what I've talked about before, that in history they didn't have our preferences for everything being symmetrical and even and everything. Like you see this a little bit off center here, and the curvature isn't uniform, and there's just a little unevenness here and there, which they didn't mind back then because they didn't have our modern conception of what machine-made perfection looks like. Look at the edge here. Even though it tapers substantially, it is still fairly thick up there, and because it's so narrow, there's very little distance throughout which you can taper it down.
Yeah, I think I would be cutting with this part of the weapon.
That does flatten out noticeably. Probably not going to cut amazingly well, but it should be decent enough. But that's also interesting that the like in terms of how it moves, how it flexes, the center of percussion is probably a little bit further down, but really where the blade geometry starts to be more usable for a cut is definitely higher up.
And we also want to think about it as slicing rather than being a cleaving sort of weapon.
There's always a more pronounced draw in rapier cuts. It is a massive rapier for sure.
It is.
But you can tell they did everything they could to make it handle and maneuver as well as possible, despite the size and length and overall weight.
So 1,240 grams is the weight of this.
Oh, really? I would have expected more.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
My guess would have been something like 1,500-ish.
Right. Yeah. It has, I think, if I compare it to a lot of rapiers that I use now, it feels very similar in weight, yet longer.
Oh!